Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth.
He's sharp, he's focused, he's bright.
I don't have any concerns, and that's from personal interactions.
This version of Biden is the best Biden ever. Not a close second.
Alert, sound.
I mean, the Republicans are like good at distractions.
I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline.
And if the Democrats were honest, they'd admit President Biden's mental capacity is declining. 6 in 10 Americans don't have confidence in Joe Biden's mental capacity.
Then you have the liberal media told bad things about me and members of the oversight committee because we have the audacity to investigate.
Giving us their drive-by diagnoses of the President of the United States.
Congressman, what you are suggesting is that I omit portions of my reasoning and explanation to the Attorney General for political reasons.
Democrats get into a frenzy.
Do you think people close to President Biden are being honest about his mental state?
And these slip-ups kind of happen.
I mean, there should be no concern.
So I don't really care if he was off for 90 minutes and didn't put on like people wanted him to put on.
I saw no more in his declaration than I've seen in anybody else.
Sharper than anyone I've spoken to.
This is a very sharp president.
Incredibly sharp, incredibly probing.
He is sharp. He is on top of things.
The president has no impairment.
Nobody's buying that. No. Nobody's buying what he's selling.
And the pipeline of videos that aren't telling the full truth.
All this right-wing propaganda that his mental acuity has declined is wrong.
The same right-wing influences that are trying to take me down are trying to take down President Biden. So
Joe Biden's not the one calling the shots.
And let's look at President Biden.
People see nobody suggests he's senile, and that's disrespectful of senior people with any kind of memory disability.
We're all aware of how he's doing.
President of Mexico, Sisi. We finally beat Medicare.
Sometimes he would say things he didn't want to say. You know what? I don't really care.
I'm serious.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
President Biden's decline and its cover-up by the people around him.
Cover-up is a very loaded term.
I don't think that there is a huge cover-up underway here.
If anybody out there gives a damn about the truth, read that interview.
Original Sin. It's about President Biden's disastrous decision to run for re-election and the cover-up of his decline.
We missed a lot of this story.
And I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline, the cover-up of his decline.
We missed a lot of this story.
If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it.
And they say I'm in good shape. Okay?
The era of the legacy media is over. And the cause of death? Suicide. Who would have ever have thought just 4 years ago that bumbling Biden and cackles Kamala would not only destroy the Democrat Party, but take down the legacy media with them as well. We get 2 for 1. Hey, gang, come on in. It's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor. I hope you're all getting ready for a wonderful and beautiful Memorial Day weekend, but I can tell you who certainly is not, and that's what's left of the ultra-woke, lying, conniving legacy media. We've got a new poll that demonstrates that for a super majority of Americans, the legacy media's reputation is in absolute tatters. According to Rasmussen, one of the single most accurate pollsters of 2024, 63% of likely voters believe that legacy media journalists and outlets deliberately covered up Biden's declining mental condition. 63%, a supermajority. That includes, if you could believe it, 43% of Democrats. You'll love this. Nearly 70% of Latinos think the media deliberately covered up Biden's failing acuity. Latinos, of course, are fast becoming the new major Republican constituency in the nation. They're MAGA through and through. It's absolutely wonderful. And so it's no coincidence that Fox News, who to their credit, I've criticized Fox plenty of times, but to their credit, consistently reported on Biden's failing acuity. Their ratings are going through the roof right now, all the while CNN and MSNBC are literally hemorrhaging their audiences. The ratings for Fox right now as we speak are double that of CNN and MSNBC combined. It's stunning. I mean, speaking of MSNBC, Morning Joe alone. Get this. Joe, F you if you can't handle the truth. Scarborough. Joe, cogent. Scarborough. Joe, best Biden ever. Scarborough lost a humiliating 40% of his audience since Trump's win. And nearly 50% of the coveted 25 to 54 age cohort, age demographic. Conservative media is crushing the legacy media as we speak. Even CNN's fake Jake Tapper is admitting that in his cash-in tour. That's what it is, right? Where he's trying to cash in on the implosion of the Democrat Party. Here's Tapper admitting that we, the conservative media, were right all along, and he and the legacy media were wrong. And then I'm going to show you how he doesn't even scratch the surface on that. Check this out.
That moment, the glitch at the immigration event, and not getting much attention outside of conservative media at all. And Alex and I are here to say that conservative media was right and conservative media was correct, and that there should be a lot of soul searching, not just among me, but among the legacy media to begin with, all of us, for how this was covered or not covered sufficiently. 100%. So, I mean, I'm not here to defend coverage that I've already acknowledged I wish I could do differently.
Save it. I mean, that's all I got to say. Save it, Jake. Frankly, stuff it, Jake. Because what he's saying there, if you think it through, is emphatically not true. True to form, fake Jake is lying right there. Fake Jake is now saying, he's repeatedly said, in fact, that conservative media, shows like ours, like yours truly, the more the civilizational, populist, independent media, we were right, and that he and the legacy media, did you catch it? What did he say? That he and the legacy media were wrong. They missed it. We were right. We caught it. We saw it. They were wrong. They missed it. They missed the biggest story of the century. If you believe that, I've got some oceanfront property in Arkansas to sell you. That is not what is happening or what happened. That is not what happened. And Jake, you freaking know it. This was not a matter of factual accuracy versus inaccuracy. This was a matter of fraud. This was not about flawed coverage. This was about fraud coverage. There is a profound moral difference between factual inaccuracies and frauds and fabrications. The legacy media routinely lied. They routinely suppressed. They routinely concealed. They routinely gaslit. You saw it in that montage. Did you think that montage that we began this program with, what the problem with it is, it was simply inaccurate? Oh, you in the right way. You got it right. We got it wrong. We were told, again, repeatedly, by all the major legacy media outlets that this was the best Biden ever. That he was more cogent than ever. We were told that he was vigorous, especially when he would ride his little bike with his helmet on around Cape Henlopen in Delaware, just an hour away from here. And if we even so much as dared to challenge that, we were maligned, we were impugned, we were accused of ageism, we were accused of mocking a stutter, we were accused of posting cheap fakes of videos demonstrating his physical and his cognitive degeneration. We were told we were cruel and unhinged for accusing Hunter of despicable, sleazy, and unethical behavior. We were called conspiracy theorists ad nauseum. This was not an issue of flawed facticity. This was an issue of blatant deception. They lied. They smeared. They concealed. They gaslit. And now that Biden is out of power, just to show everyone how really evil they are, they're all trying to cash in on the cover-up. Does fake Jake actually expect us to believe that had Kamala won that election, we would even remotely be having this conversation right now? Does he really expect us to believe that had she and the Democrats won in November, he would be doing his book tour at any point in the next 4 years? The legacy media did not get Biden wrong. What went wrong is they got caught. And they got caught because they lost. The man and the political party that they actively campaigned for, defended, shielded, safeguarded, protected, advocated for, that party went down in flames in November. And why? Because no one believes them anymore. No one believes them, not after lie after lie after lie, Russian collusion, Hunter Biden's laptop, the Very Fine People hoax, the Maryland Man hoax, the Elon Musk Nazi salute. Kavanaugh was a drunk rapist. Trump was a rapist. Trump trashed the troops. Border agents were whipping illegals. J6 was an insurrection. The border's secure. The economy is the best it's ever been. Inflation is actually good for you. The bloodbath hoax, the Iowa poll hoax. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on. This is why the legacy media is imploding. They're imploding because of the thousands of cuts to their own credibility that they themselves inflicted. And that self-infliction has completely blown apart their business model. Because their business model, the business model for any media venture is one ultimately built on trust. That's the only reason why you guys tune into this show. And I'm keenly aware of that. We all are. I know that I can't hide behind a moniker of legitimacy, a CNN moniker, an ABC News moniker that legitimates me by virtue of its own legitimation. I've got to earn your trust each and every day. So this is what sets apart independent content creators from the legacy media anchors. They hide behind the trust that their media outlet brand has already secured, whereas we independent content creators have to daily earn your trust. And so accuracy and truth become premiums to our news analysis. What makes the legacy media particularly diabolical is that at some point they believed that they could exploit the legitimacy that they had acquired over the years to fabricate news and narrative rather than report it. They were so arrogant. They were so confident in their own ability to persuade and influence public opinion that they believed they could literally tell us anything and we would believe it. They pushed fraud after fraud after hoax, thinking that if all of them said it enough and if they all said it together, that would manipulate us to believe it. Case in point, take a look at this montage over Trump's meeting with the South African president yesterday. Look at this.
In the Oval Office today, the tense confrontation, President Trump ambushing the president of South Africa.
Up next, another Oval Office meltdown. President Trump ambushing the president of South Africa.
President Trump is being accused of conducting something of a diplomatic ambush of South Africa's president in the Oval Office.
To be with you, I'm Katie Tur. President Trump orchestrated another Oval Office ambush today.
Today, Donald Trump meeting with the president of South Africa and attempting to ambush and humiliate that leader.
Zelensky territory, where essentially he was a bit ambushed inside the Oval Office.
Felt like an ambush in there, kind of like the President Zelensky meeting in the Oval Office.
This was an ambush. It was orchestrated.
Cyril Ramaphosa brought his best diplomatic self to this meeting, but nothing could have prepared him for this multimedia ambush.
What started as, to some degree, an ambush.
Well, Katie, I mean, it was an ambush.
Ambushed. Ambushed.
An ambush.
Ambushing.
Ambushed inside the Oval Office.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to come out and say it. They're liars. Their monolithic scripted talking points are all total fabricated frauds. And they've been caught. They've been caught red-handed. And now their credibility for a supermajority of voters has been shattered. The era of the legacy media is over. And ultimately, we have them and their own blatant dishonesty to thank. Hey everyone, it's me, Dr. Steve, and I've got a special invitation for you if you'll be in Las Vegas for the Bitcoin conference. Now, I'm hosting an exclusive welcome dinner there on May 27th called the Golden Age Gathering. It'll be an incredible night with courageous conversation and a live Q&A session. You even get a signed copy of my best-selling book over here. Best part, if you're a Courageous Patriots Club member at the gold level, your ticket's already free. Space is super limited, so head on over to goldenagesummit.net/viva-liberty, or just click on the link below and reserve your seat today. I'll see you there.
This morning, federal investigators calling the massive blast that shook the idyllic desert community of Palm Springs an intentional act of terrorism.
This was a targeted attack against the IDF facility.
Law enforcement sources telling NBC News the suspect in the car bombing appeared to have an antinatalist ideology, a belief that having children is morally wrong.
Unbelievable. In what has been deemed by the FBI as an intentional act of terrorism, a fertility clinic in Palm Springs, California, was just bombed. The suspect is a 25-year-old radical antinatalist who died in the blast while trying to live stream his attack. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. It's part of a disturbing trend, a growing darkness on the radical left that's openly anti-children, anti-family, and anti-life itself. The FBI has confirmed that the suspect was motivated by what they call antinatalist ideology. Antinatalism is the belief that having children is morally wrong, that bringing life into the world is some kind of ethical crime because in their twisted view, life equals suffering. This guy left behind a manifesto and a 30-minute audio rant where he called himself anti-life and railed against in vitro fertilization, saying it's the epitome of pro-life ideology. His goal was to sterilize this planet of the disease of life. The FBI is investigating this as part of a broader probe into what they're calling nihilistic extremism. And experts are warning that this ideology is gaining traction, actually among young progressives radicalized online. This bombing wasn't just an attack on a building. It was an attack on hope. It was an attack on families in the future, on the very idea of creating life itself. And it isn't the first time we've seen this. Antinatalist extremists have been linked to other attacks, from vandalism to threats against reproductive health facilities and pro-life pregnancy resource centers. This is a movement growing in the dark corners of the internet, fueled by a toxic mix of nihilism, climate alarmism, and leftist ideology that is increasingly anti-human. And the radical left's own leaders are fanning these flames. I mean, we saw just recently Hillary Clinton had the audacity to say that women having more children is going back to some oppressive patriarchal past. She insinuated that women who chose to build families are, quote, handmaidens, as if raising the next generation is some kind of betrayal of feminism, some kind of patriarchal punishment. Many interpret Clinton's words as a dog whistle to the antinatalist crowd, giving them cover to escalate their war on life. Meanwhile, we're seeing Elon Musk continuing to sound the alarm about the global birth rate crisis. All 50 states are showing surprising new lows. The U.S. fertility rate is at 1.6 children per woman, the lowest in our history, well below the replacement rate of 2.1. Across the developed world, birth rates are plummeting as well. And Musk has been crystal clear. This isn't just a statistical blip. It's an existential threat. He said, quote, "The birth rate is very low in almost every country, and unless that changes, civilization will disappear." Now, he's been countering the antinatalist and anti-family movements in America by funding research and pushing policies to encourage families to grow, because he sees what's at stake: a shrinking workforce, collapsing economies, and a future where our values, our culture, and our very way of life can fade away. A 2024 Pew poll found that over a quarter of adults who don't want kids cite environmental concerns as a major reason. This is the same crowd that's been radicalizing young people online, convincing them that life itself is a problem to be solved through sterilization or, in extreme cases, violence, like we saw in California. They're not just opting out of parenthood. They're trying to tear down the very systems that support it. So what do we do about this crisis? Well, joining me today to discuss the solution to rising antinatalism in America and our current demographic crisis is prominent pro-natalist advocate Malcolm Collins. You've read about him in virtually all the major legacy media outlets, but now you're going to hear him for yourself. Pretty amazing guy. Malcolm, welcome back. Great to see you.
Hello. I am so excited to be here. And what I find so great about this topic is it pairs so well with what you were saying leading up to this about how we have been gaslit by legacy media about the world that we're living in and what's happening in it. Many people are surprised when I tell them that this is not the first terrorist attack motivated by antinatalist philosophy that they have heard of. They're like, come on, that can't be true. And I'm like, actually, have you heard of the Christchurch mosque shooting? And they're like, yeah, but wasn't that guy a great replacement theorist or something? And it's like, no, that is what the media said. What if you actually read his manifesto, his concern was that there were too many people in the world. And the reason he targeted Muslims was because they had more kids than other groups. And they twisted that to be great replacement theorist. He wanted everyone having less kids. If you then go to the Sandy Hook shooting, if you look at the actual manifesto, he linked to the philosophy of ethilism, which this IVF bomber also linked to, which is life spelled backwards, which is an extremist antinatalist philosophy.
Wow.
What I want to talk about on this show, because I'm really excited to be talking with you, is one, what this philosophy believes, not as a straw man, but like, what is their actual philosophical, how did they come to this idea that they have a moral mandate to kill children?
Yeah.
That's an extremist belief. And if the left doesn't take the time to understand our perspectives. Right. And there's been studies on this that shows the left can't empathize with the right, but the right can empathize with the left remarkably well, because we are not at risk in understanding. I'm not at risk that I'm going to want to kill kids if I understand this philosophy better. So I want to dig into that. But then I also want to dig into how this philosophy is downstream of all modern leftist thought and policy. And eventually, either the left completely changes what they are and what they stand for, or this is where they're all going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Tell us about this antinatalism philosophy and ideology. Go for it.
Yeah, so essentially it boils down to the belief that human life is predominated by suffering. And It makes sense if you think about it in a broad sense. What they will say is, yes, while you may feel some positive emotional states, the positive emotional states you feel aren't as loud as the negative emotional states. Like there are very few pleasures you will feel that are as loud as, say, stubbing your toe, much less, dying of cancer or something like that. And they may even, some of them who are negative utilitarians would even argue that positive emotional states don't have any value at all. Now you could say, how do they get to this? Well, what they would say is, okay, I'm choosing to bring a person into the world, right? If I bring a person into the world and that person lives a life of suffering, I have done a moral negative. But they will say, if I don't bring a person into the world and that person doesn't feel positive emotion, so even if they would have had an overwhelmingly positive emotional life, I have not done a moral negative because I have caused no harm to the individual I didn't bring into existence because that individual doesn't exist. And then they extend this philosophy of suffering reduction. They're like, a paperclip maximizing robot is suffering reduction. It's like, okay, suffering is bad. How do I end suffering? I need to remove things that can suffer, like humans. But if you go to the ethalists, like what this guy was, they often have a philosophy of also wanting to eradicate all other life. All other animals, everything that's alive on the planet. They call it glassing the planet. And so this is an ideology that is unlike anything we have ever fought as a species. When we have gone through great philosophical divides in the past, the famous line of, I hope the Russians love their children too. There was always this belief that communism versus capitalism, at least we both agree we want humanity to survive.
Yeah, that was the foundation of mutually assured destruction. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
that wouldn't work with this community, and it's something that we're seeing increasingly with the right, where when Elon, they don't just when Elon says we need to have kids, we need to protect our civilization, but when he talks about, let's take our manifest destiny among the stars, let's go to space, let's colonize Mars, they start screeching as well. The idea of humanity continuing developing and continuing flourishing is something that terrifies them.
Right. Wow. How linked is this to the apocalyptic environmentalist concerns and ecology
This is really interesting. So one, I would note for people who think this is a fringe movement, if you look at something like Google Trends, antinatalist ideology right now is about as big as natalist ideology. So there are, if you look at subreddit size, the pro-natalist subreddit is, I think, 1/10 the size of like the antinatalist subreddit. So this is a very large community, and there are two broad factions within it. One faction wants to eradicate humanity because of the impact that humans have on the environment. This is the voluntary human extinction movement, which believes this. They're one faction of this. The other group, the David Benatar negative utilitarian antinatalists, believe this suffering argument. What's really interesting is in the pro-natalist movement, the environmentalists often attack us and they're like, oh, don't you care about the environment? And I'm like, what do you mean the most famous pro-natalists all started as environmentalists. Like Elon was famously obsessed with global warming. That's what Tesla, so my wife got her undergraduate degree in environmental business and her first jobs were at Acor and Earth Day Network. All of what happened is we kept looking at the statistics and we changed our mind about what the biggest threat was to human flourishing based on the statistics. And then other people were like, oh, I actually wasn't concerned about the statistics. I was just cheering for humans to die.
Wow. Oh my heavens. Heavens.
Do you want to dig into any of this, or do you want me to go into the connections to mainstream leftist philosophy?
Yeah, let's go into the connection with the mainstream leftist. That'll be fascinating. Yeah, and then I'm also curious if you could get into, because you did cue it up a little bit. Why are particularly young people so attracted to this? Those are great questions. I mean, if you think it's about, I know you studied philosophy and stuff. The Gautama Buddha was telling us whole life is suffering, but he offered 4 noble truths and an 8-fold path. He didn't start, bombing fertility clinic. It's just like, what the heck? How did they you go from, yes, there is suffering. Jordan Peterson will tell us this, but there is something so noble about breaking through that suffering. That's why we love our J.R.R. Tolkien and all that sort of stuff. And they just seem to be so dark and so demonic.
It is really depressing. Well, I mean, just to quickly get into, before I go further, to get into the, like, why this is a dumb, I accidentally persuaded anyone that this philosophy makes sense. Basically, no human, like, I've never seen an artistic depiction or work of humanity when it was reflecting on what a good life was, that it ever did a utilitarian suffering equation. When it's not about how many times you orgasmed. It's not about how much good food you ate. Nobody on their deathbed is thinking about that stuff. When you see artistic depictions of the good life, think of Gladiator, right? It's not about, it's about that he lived a life where he had a family, that he loved, and where he worked to make the future better. That is, for every sane person.
They're transcendent values that draw us up to themselves, as it were. Exactly. This is a very sort of childish, very like middle school level philosophy, like only suffering and pain, though they're the only two things that exist. And I'd also note here that this idea that you have not done a moral harm by preventing someone from existing is also, I think, very childish. Like if you go back in time and there's somebody who, like, you're competing against at work or you don't like, and you went and you sterilized their parents, like, obviously you've done a negative, right? They don't have, just because they haven't, if I set up a claymore that's going to go off, maybe 100 years in the future when somebody opens my tomb, and it blows them up, just because they haven't been born yet doesn't mean I haven't done a moral negative. That's just like an absurd philosophy. Right. Well said.
But anyway, so let's go into what this has to do with modern leftism. So if you go to the leftist philosophy of the 90s and stuff like that, there was this idea that leftism was about promoting equality, right? Like, let's get everyone more equal and let's sort of long-term do harm reduction. If you look at modern leftism, while many believe that this is the philosophy that they're following, if you look at the policy actions and sort of freakouts that you see, you actually see a very different predominating philosophy, which is a removal of in-the-moment suffering. So for some examples of what I mean by this, if you look in California, where like they're removing testing, like grades from students, right? Because students who got bad grades, it hurt their feelings, right? Well, obviously that increases inequality, because now, the rich kids are still going to SAT prep and everything like that. If you look at the instances where they're handing out fentanyl on the streets, like, not having your drugs in the moment, bad, but obviously that's going to promote inequality for the families that can have their kids go to, to pay for them to go to rehab. If you look at something like the HAES movement, the Healthy at Every Size movement, which is this movement where they shame and shut down, through like fat studies departments, research that shows being fat is unhealthy, because they believe that telling somebody that being fat is unhealthy is hurtful. Now, of course, in the long run, that helps that individual.
Right.
But in the moment, it causes suffering. Or maybe the most archetypical example of all of this is trigger warnings. Trigger warnings, obviously, being exposed to ideas that challenge you is a good thing. That helps our society. But they have built this philosophy of shutting that down. And this is, and you could also argue that some of the gender ideology comes from this. You must affirm me for anything I want to believe about myself, regardless of the long-term mental health consequences of this. But that's a whole different talk, and maybe a bit spicier that we're not going to go into. But you see across this leftist urban monoculture philosophy, this let's remove in the moment suffering, regardless of the long-term consequences, the long-term increase in suffering. And when I look at causes like pronatalism, and I go to people and I'm like, hey, like, I don't understand why you on the left don't care that a dependency ratio cascade is going to eventually, this is like in the United States right now, you have 1.8 taxpayers for every one person living off the system. As our society gets older, as we have fewer kids, eventually this breaks, and that breaks Social Security. That breaks welfare. This isn't Elon Musk looking for employees employees. Elon Musk is fine. We are fine. It's the most vulnerable people in the society who the left claims to care about. And what I realized is they don't care about suffering people in the future. They only care about suffering people today.
Wow.
And this is how this comes out of the movement. But then there's a second thing. Why is this so alluring to people? Well, there's a few reasons. One of the biggest is a lot of these people, and this is more like the older leftists where you see this problem, they lived their entire life trying to be a leftist good boy. I think if you look at like rightist philosophy, it's based around trying to fix problems in the world, right? If you look at leftist philosophy, it's around framing the world in a way where those problems don't exist in the first place. So leftists will pretend things like there's no such thing as beauty. Beauty is subjective. Everyone is equally beautiful. Now, this is obviously wrong. Like, right? Like there are more attractive people than other people. But they'll make these framings. They'll say
a cathedral versus a warehouse, right?
They'll say well, if you look at the buildings the leftists make, they look like that more and more often.
You're right.
You look at their art. They'll say everyone is equally talented, right? You know, you don't inherit anything from your parents. Like this is obviously wrong. But if you admit this, then a meritocratic society becomes an unfair society, right? You know, so they take all of these framings, which is like the world would be better if this was true, and I'm just not going to engage with these ideas. So a lot of people spent their entire lives trying to look and see themselves as good people alongside the leftist urban monocultural value system. And now the data has changed. Now no educated person now can look at the data and say, oh yes, fertility collapse isn't a problem, because they used to be able to say we can solve this with immigration, and now you've got the Latin American fertility collapse, where I'm pretty sure now over half of Latin American countries have a lower fertility rate than we have. Like it's really bad in Latin America right now.
Yeah, I know it's very low in Brazil. I know it's the Portuguese.
Costa Rica might be below 1 now for native borns. Uruguay is like at 1.3. Chile is I think 1.2 to below 1 now. So it's bad. Cuba is 1.3. What I heard. Jamaica is really low. So we're looking at a bad situation because they have worse economies than we have.
Right.
So their systems are going to break faster, and we're taking their workforce, right? You know, so again, like we're further victimizing them. So leftists can't say, oh, we can just solve this. So now they need to make a choice. Are they the bad guys? Have they been living a fundamentally selfish lifestyle, not paying to the future the debt they owe the past, the debt they owe their ancestors? Because everybody up until them had kids, right? So do they need to accept that in this area of life they are being selfish? Or instead of changing their lifestyle, they can adapt this simple, and I will admit that the antinatalist, negative utilitarian logical framework is internally consistent. It's not as stupid as like broad, like if you look at like broad leftist ideology, it's not internally consistent. It's just, but this idea
it's a starting point that's insane, right? I think it was G.K. Chesterton said, even the lunatic, if you think it through, is the problem with the lunatic is not that he's illogical, it's that he's only logical, right? He can't think beyond the frame of just this very almost autistic sort of sequencing, when life is far more than just logic per se.
Well, this frame of if I haven't brought somebody into existence, I have in no way done a harm to them, right? Like this framing is a very easy framing. Like if you don't scratch at it, it's a very easy and internally logically consistent framing to find appealing. And so they have this life preserver that they can grab in the water now that they're on the bad guy side.
Right.
And that's why it's growing, because the left either has to admit that the right was correct about this falling fertility rate thing, about the lifestyle of indulgence and self-gratification that the left has adopted, that this was going to lead to negative externalities. They can admit that, which they won't, right? Why not just grab onto this? Why not say, actually, we're trying to reduce sufferings? If you look at the note that this guy left, the way that he worded it is he goes, I am killing nobody. I am only changing the date that they die. Parents, kill people because they bring them to life, which puts them on the pathway to death. That is a statement that, while like insane to people still in touch with reality, is logically internally coherent.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then you have the second problem, which is, okay, why are people adopting this? It also is very good. We have an episode of our podcast where we talk about the psychological protection of doomerism, which is to say that when you are enthusiastic about a thing, when you are excited about a thing, whether that's life or a hobby or anything, and you are in a community setting and you are talking about this, if somebody shuts you down, if somebody acts skeptically, if somebody's like, well, actually, that's not that great, that person, it's like a social dynamic hack that allows them to enter the position of dominance, because you were excited about something and now they just said that thing isn't that good. So you must not be sophisticated. So you must, I mean, people have been doing this since the beatniks, right? Like, you know, with their old nihilistic framing, you know, hanging out, smoking their lung. This has been a part of pop culture for a long time, and particularly youth pop culture. This is why nihilism is so big within youth pop culture. And so if you're already feeling bad, and the urban monocultural framing, this idea of just indulge in whatever you want to believe about yourself, indulge in pleasures whenever you want to, you know, it psychologically damages these people. You see in polls, if you look at mental health rates on the left, they are incredibly low when compared to mental health rates on the right. There was a really interesting poll recently that actually found that if you look at social media, like how much you use social media, people who on the right are on social media a lot, they're not that hurt by social media. People on the left who are on social media all the time are significantly hurt by social media. So the more of this ideology they consume, the more it damages their mental health, the sadder they are on a day-to-day basis. On our podcast recently, we sort of had a framing that what we are trying to do is sort of lead people to this gladiator and to, you know, have a family, have kids, play with them. There is a good life if you sacrifice in the short term. And there was this horror series from the 80s called Hellraiser with the
I remember.
You remember the bad guys in it, the Cerebites, I want to say they were called. Their whole philosophy was just search for pleasure, search for pleasure, search for pleasure. And they begin to become numb for pleasure, and they begin cutting off their skin. They begin doing all these horrifying things to themselves. And then they go and they abduct other people into this lifestyle. And I can see that's we're not in this trying to deny you pleasure or self-validation. We're trying to deny what's at the end of this tunnel, or warn you, catch you before you run off this cliff. And so they go into these states of huge amounts of negative mental health. And then that allows within these communities, because if you look at the social hierarchy within antinatalist and ethicist communities, it is typically based on how miserable you are. If you say, I am satisfied with my life, but I am compelled by these arguments, they will make fun of you. They will attack you. If you talk about how horrible your life is, you will get affirmation from other people. Because what humorously these ethicists and antinatalists miss is even within their own communities, they don't try to maximize their happiness or minimize their suffering. What they maximize is their internal self-perception. What they maximize is their internal image, because humans don't really care that much about suffering or happiness. They care the most often about whatever. I mean, think about this individual who bombed the clinic, right? He was going to you know, potentially kill people. Like, that is something or all this talk about consent that would have robbed other individuals about consent. You know, there are many ethical ways he could have approached this, but it maximized his own self-image.
Yes. Another movie I was just thinking about is Groundhog Day. What was it, 1992 or so, right? Because the hedonism and so forth. And then he literally tries to kill himself. He's done with it. He can't live anymore. And then the old maxim is, you know, one loses himself, then one finds himself. Through death, we find life. And then he discovers truth, goodness, beauty, you know, beautiful literature, art, architecture, music, poem. He finds reason to live it for other people, to live again, and to serve others and so forth, not to be served like the narcissistic hedonist. Malcolm, I know you said you have a hard break.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit longer. I haven't
Okay,
heard
good.
We have a film crew here from Germany today. We had one from Japan yesterday. We had another one from Germany the day before. We're doing the international rounds, trying to wake up these
that's
countries.
awesome, man. That's interesting because my wife is Japanese. She's actually off to Japan and in the next few days to go and visit family. And of course, they're I think quite a bit ahead of us, unfortunately, down this primrose path of.
Japan was really fun because my wife was born in Japan. I'm a big lover of Japanese culture. I showed them that a lot of new right stuff has Japanese culture etched into it. Shinzo Abe is like the key sort of this mythical figure. The United States new. I showed them videos. I showed them like Man's World. I was like, look on the back of Man's World. It's anime and Shinzo Abe.
Donald, move your head, Donald. Move your head.
Right? No, but it's like, why is all of this? Why is all this anime and stuff like this? In part, it's because what the right realized in response to this, what I'm talking about, this person who walks into the room and is like, well, that's not that cool, or that's cringe. Lean in. Don't listen to anyone out there who's telling you when you're engaged in something that's fun and exciting and playful and you like it and it's big and they're like, well, Shinzo Abe wasn't really talking to Trump. Yeah, whatever. It's fun to pretend he was. Like, why do we need to? Anime is vulgar. Yeah, but it's fun.
Yeah,
chill out, you nerd.
It would. I should just let you loose on these guys.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I mean, we've talked about this before. And I think you and your wife embody this is that it is so archaeo-future. It's very modern, but it's also incredibly mythical and traditional anime, mythical and traditional. And the Japanese love to blend tech and tradition together in these wonderfully new and unique ways. And that's what makes the new and the old always fresh and exciting and so on. And that's to me where I think these nihilists the antinatalists just don't seem to get. They seem to have cut themselves off from tradition. And they don't see how tradition is not going back and it's not repressive. It's actually freeing, incredibly freeing, because it puts it, just like you said, it puts us in touch with the archetypes that are always true. And then if we find modern expressions of archetypes that are always true, we always renew life and find a flourishing center, as it were.
Well, these traditions gave us framework to find things in life above mere pleasure and pain. The reason I go back to that famous scene from Gladiator, walking to his kid with the hand on the grain and everything, is one, because it's so evocative. Like, everybody remembers that scene, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's beautiful. Yeah.
But
it's very Edenic. Yeah. It's wonderful.
Yeah. If I take this scene and I give it to one of these individuals, or a far leftist, and I'm like, do you understand why this would be heaven?
Right.
Why this would be the highest positive that this person could ever experience? They don't have a framework for. They'd be like, well, it's patriarchy, or it's he wants a people dependent on him. I don't, they can't. There was a meme that went around recently, which is an anime show that came out, which was about a guy who was caring for this girl who was in a wheelchair, and he fell in love with her, and she really needed him and appreciated everything he did. And somebody posted it was like this is what men really want, right? Yeah. And all the leftists attacked it, like, oh, you want a disabled woman or somebody like that, and people were like, do you not understand the concept of men wanting somebody who appreciates the sacrifice you make for them? At the end of the day, what we really want, what he wanted in Gladiator, what is to be able to make sacrifices to help others. Yeah. That is the happiest you will ever be, is making sacrifices for a well thought through value system that benefits other people.
And he lived by the hope that the sacrifice that he and his family ended up making could bring Rome back to life again. Now, right? So through, it's literally the Abraham Lincoln sort of John 3:16 kind of motif. Through their death, we might live. That's the beauty, and that there's a nobility to that. There's a beauty to that, and that to aspire to that enables then us to make it through our sufferings.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that you have with anime is wokeness has reached Japan less than it has in the US. Right, so exactly. You can get animes with explicitly pro-natalist theming. Grandpa and Grandpa Turn Young Again, Darling with Franks, or my favorite in this category, Gurren Lagann, where literally the villain of the show believes that Earth has a carrying capacity, but acts like a Captain Planet villain, trying to keep humans from ever going above. I
love it. Oh, wow, that's so cool.
Ever go above the ground, ever reach our potential.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of just like, no, go above, like, don't care what anyone has to say. The other funny thing I think about your wife being Japanese is there's this funny trick. I didn't know this about your wife in the pronatalist movement, which is every single well-known pronatalist I can think of, other than myself, you, and Kevin Dolan. No, sorry, not you. Myself, Kevin Dolan, and that's it. Has an East Asian wife or husband.
Really? Well, like, for example, the traditional element to it, right?
Yeah. Or husband, because I was thinking of Catherine Pocklock there. Who has an East Asian husband.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's so funny that they're all like, oh, all of these white nationalists or whatever, and I'm like, well, they're
right. Well, they would be the Asian voice of white nationalism. They'll find a way of,
an episode 2 where I'm going to go into the white nationalism's diversity problem. It's too diverse. We need to de-diversify white nationalism.
We need to right the problem. How to de-diversify white now. I love it.
Why do the Proud Boys have a black leader? This is nonsense.
Exactly. Malcolm, we're going to have links down below, but where do you want everyone to go to keep up with your amazing work?
If you want to check us out, check us out at Basecamp on YouTube, whatever. If you want to check out some of the tools that we've been you can check out Parasia.io or the Collins Institute. You can just Google these. They're easy to find. This is our automated school system where we built with a Socratic AI tutor combined with a big tech tree of things you can learn as an alternative to the existing schooling system. We're looking to get more people using this. The other one that we've been working on recently is Whizzling.ai. That's Whizzling spelled with a Z. This is a little AI thing that you can tell what it is, like what stuffed animal it is, and what subjects it should focus on, then put it in a stuffed animal or give it to your kid. And when your kid talks to it, it'll talk back to him while always drawing the conversation back to the academic subject that you pre-chose. So we're just always working on building little things for our kids, and I want other people to have access.
You're frontier ventures. I just love what you're doing. And again, you're the embodiment of this archeo-future world that's rising. Tradition and technology come together in new and exciting ways, and it's just wonderful. And I love what you do. And I know you've got a young family starting. My oldest daughter just graduated law school. How's that? We just went to her.
You are too old. You cannot be that old.
Yeah, man. Oh yeah, I'm getting up there. That's right. Yeah, we have 4 kids, and our oldest one just graduated graduate school. I can't believe this last weekend. We just had the ceremony. So God bless you and all the working with your kids and just all the amazing stuff that you guys are doing.
Well, thank you so much. And
keep up the amazing work. And let's have you on anytime, Malcolm. You always have an open invitation.
Something fun happens. Not saying IVF bombings are fun, but eventful. It's a crazy time.
Let's hope it's going to be the good news next time in terms of birth rates and the like, and all some human flourishing activity. That's for sure.
Right. Have a good day.
You too, Mike. Thanks. God bless, man. But first, do you ever wonder why your brain feels foggy even when you're eating clean and exercising? It might not be burnout. It could be parasites. It's true. Groundbreaking research from Dr. Alan McDonald revealed a direct link between chronic parasitic infections and neurological diseases like multiple sclerosis. Parasites can cause inflammation, nerve damage, and long-term cognitive decline. More reason to do a full body cleanse at least once a year. The Wellness Company has a solution for you. ivermectin and mebendazole, the gold standard parasite solution, now combined in one cleanse combo, designed to eliminate harmful invaders and support your immune system naturally. Medical grade, not some trendy herbal gimmicks. All you got to do is just fill out a quick intake form and get a 3-month supply shipped straight to your door. Maha is officially here, and the wellness company is making hard-to-get medications digitally accessible so you can live your best life. Head on over to twc.health/Turley and use code Turley to save $90 off plus free shipping. Click on that link below and cleanse your body today. All right, we move on to that last section of our show where you have your hotline call-in, 717-844-5984. That is Dr. Steve's hotline. All you have to do is call that number, leave a message on there, try to keep it under 30 seconds, and I'll be happy to answer your questions, feature it on here on this segment of our show, and then answer whatever questions you have for me. 717-844-5984. Micah, what's our first question?
Turley, my name is Mark Covington. I'm an 81-year-old lifelong resident of the state of Texas. I don't know if it was you or one of your fellow conservative YouTube commentators made the comment recently that we don't have to worry about Texas. Texas is the tip of the conservative spear. Well, sir, with all due respect, you are totally wrong. I'm a lifelong conservative, but the reason I'm calling is to see if you can send somebody down here to Texas to make public what the rhinos have done in the Congressional House in Austin. They have taken over the House, and between the rhinos and the Democrats, they're preventing anything conservative from being passed. There's only one representative, Brian Harrison, I believe is in District 10, which is my district, is standing up. He has the courage of Trump, but he's only one man. Nobody seems to willing to help him. But if more people would be made aware of what's going on in the Austin government in Texas, maybe we could shame these rhinos to stop what they're doing. Thank you for your time. Bye.
Thank you, Mark. That's wonderful. Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever said we don't have to worry about I may have said we don't have to worry about Texas turning blue. It's getting deeper and deeper red just electorally. But no, we covered the Ken Paxton persecution quite extensively. I have been very frustrated with Texan Republicans, very frustrated precisely with the rhino. And look, I don't know if this is where it started. I just know a historical fix point in this frustration is the, frankly, the Bushification of Texan politics, right? And the Bushes are not Texan. They are New Englanders through and through. And George Herbert Walker Bush basically, he, as I understand it, he came down to Texas and he united Texas Oil with the U.S. military, with the CIA connections. And so that's how he kind of made his way into Texas politics with a lot of money, brought a lot of money with him. And that's usually how it all works. It's just this swirl around some kind of slush fund. And so Texas was radically, the Texas Republican Party, just Texas conservatism was radically shaped by a non-Texan force, namely the Bushes. And that's where you get your Karl Roves and your I guess former Speaker of the House and so forth. And then when you get real good conservative MAGA people like Ken Paxton and so forth, they're the first ones that they try to take out. So I know it's incredibly frustrating, and yes, we'll be happy to cover that. I covered it, not covered it up. I didn't do that. I didn't do a fake Jake Tapper sort of thing. I covered it with Ken Paxton and his impeachment hearings, and talked. And I took a very strong stance on behalf of Ken Paxton and called out those rhino, pathetic, disgusting Republicans that were putting him through that and drumming up all these fake charges against him, like they always do. It's always lawfare in our country if you want to basically character assassinate a person. And and I know Abbott, I've been critical and also supportive as well, because he puts his finger up or just decides what side of the bed he wants to get out of. So I know he's frustrating as well. But I'm with you. I got you. I got your back, man. Mark, you're 100% right on that. You obviously, you're born and bred, and I as somebody outside of Texas, I've gotten enough intel from inside, from good conservatives saying, Dr. Steve, this is Texas Republican Party is a big John Cornyn. Do we need to say any more? So I'm with you, man. I'm with you. It's a problem. And now, as long as we're starting to see this new political realignment that's moving away from the horizontal divide of left versus right to more the vertical, people versus the political class, the more the Cornyns are going to be called out, the more the Karl Roves are going to be called out, the more all of the pathetic, Republican rhinos in your state house and state legislature, they're going to be all called out, and eventually they'll get replaced. That's what I'm hopeful on. But until then, it's incredibly, incredibly frustrating. I know I'm with you on that. Absolutely, Mark.
Just like to know more about the Chinese people that have their police force in I think it's Arizona or up there in Colorado. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, the Chinese police force, international Chinese police force embedded in different parts of the world. Yeah. So, as I understand it, and I've only done cursory research on this, but you have just over 100 accounted for Chinese police outlets abroad, all over the world. I don't think we actually know how many are embedded here in the United States. And their basic, it was back in 2023, 2 Chinese officials were arrested. Actually, this was New York City, though. I think it was the city, not the state. But anyway, but it was New York. So I don't know Arizona or Colorado. I don't know the specific state, but it would be the same phenomenon wherever it is. But the gist is, well, they were arrested for running an illegal, an unapproved police jurisdiction inside the United States. So basically, when you have all these Chinese nationals all over the world, scattered all over, particularly say to study at universities and so forth, they embed informants within those Chinese communities who then provide the surveillance needed by the Chinese government to make sure they're behaving, that they don't defect or that sort of thing. And so there is a police force that could arrest them and take them back to China. That is illegal, as I understand, in the United States, if it is not, of course, diplomatically a part of the State Department for them to be able to engage in that activity. Once you're here, you're under our laws, not China's laws. And so, so that's what they are. There's over 100 of them, as I understand, accounted for around the world. I don't know how many are embedded here, but yeah, they're here. They're here. And if they are here, to the extent that they're here, as I understand, they're operating illegally. So it tends to be very much underground. And I don't know how much of a problem it is or even how big it is. But it is something to be concerned about, no question. But I don't think it's only China. I'm sure there's a number of countries that are doing something akin to that some kind. It's technically it's a form of spying. That's basically it's a form of espionage, but it's on their own citizens, ironically, not on trying to get U.S. secrets or anything akin to that. But again, I think it could be exploited. You know, they are one of the biggest stealers of IP, and so that's a lot of. There's a big concern that that's pretty much the main reason why so many are here in the United States to study, and that is to bring our intellectual property back into China so they can basically rip it off. So anyway, so that's I don't have any more information on that.
Charlie, hi, this is Lawrence Schindler. I have a simple question. We're an extremely divided country. We don't have news anymore. We have left-wing and right-wing news. The left has been listening to basically propaganda for 10 years, hate Trump, hate Orange Man. How do we solve that problem? How do we unite the country? How do these people get unindoctrinated? How do we pull everybody together again? Thank you.
Oh, such a good question. And I know absolutely it's heartbreaking how divided we are. It's a complex issue, no question about it. I mean, at one level, remember, we're living in the midst of what's known as post-normal times. Okay, this is what the Pakistani British scholar Zaid Sadar refers to it as post-normal time. He kind of gave birth to this field of study of post-normality, and we're not the first to be in this period of time. Any civilization that's going from one era to another era, this massive sort of tectonic transition, has a period that's known as post-normal. And what post-normality is technically is the interim period between the end of one era and the beginning of a new era, so that the normal of the old era, just like you said, we don't have news anymore. So the implication there is that there was one time we did have news. There was one time that our media really did seek to report and get it right. That's the old era. There will be a new era where that happens again. But the problem is that era has come to an end because the getting it right was based on modernity, on liberalism, on cosmopolitan values that dominated the modern age for close to 300 years. But that globalist, liberal, modernist ideology has just imploded in the hearts and minds of most people. So scholars are arguing we're moving from an age of ideology, communism versus capitalism, that kind of stuff, to now an age of identity, where all populations are going back to their civilizations, to nation, culture, custom, tradition. So that's why identity politics is so big today. But until the new era, the civilizational conservative era, establishes a new normal, the old normal is sort of gone, although there's still some lag, of course, institutional lag. The old normal is gone. The new normal has yet to establish itself. So we're in this interim period, which is known as post-normal, where very few things make sense. And there's 3 C's to post-normality. There's complexity, there's chaos, and contradiction. So complexity is everything is breaking apart. Nothing is getting unified anymore. Just again, very much like you're asking in your question. Things are chaotic in terms of the speed of the information that we're getting today, just through the internet and through what's called big data, where both facts and fiction are all sort of mixed together in this massive conglomeration of knowledge and information. And then there's contradiction, that things are not just breaking apart, but they're breaking apart in such a way that they're moving in opposite directions. So that's the wealthy have gotten ultra wealthy, and the poor have gotten increasingly poor, and they're just moving in these opposite directions. Urban life is moving in the opposite direction from rural life, for example, as we see politically, and so forth. So the good news is that in the midst of all of this turbulence and tumult, a new world is rising where it's going to establish a very strong, revitalized civic nationalism. And civic nationalism involves the customs, cultures, and traditions that hold a multi-ethnic people together. So we have multiple different cultures that live within our country. But what civic nationalism does is it creates a meta culture where it defines itself so well that we all see ourselves in some way, shape, or form, even though we may be of different religious backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds. We still, nevertheless, all see ourselves as one unified people. And that's found in civic ritual and what we call civic nationalism, as opposed to like an ethno or tribalized nationalism. And one of my favorite scholars on this is Carol Swain of the University of Vanderbilt. I believe she's retired now, and she ended up writing this amazing work called The New White Nationalism in the year 2000, so 24 years ago. So she's 25 years ago. She was really, really ahead of this, ahead of the curve of identity politics and sort of, Black tribalism, Latino tribalism, even to a certain extent, white tribalisms. And so what she basically argued is that new white nationalism that was emerging was not because of the old Ku Klux Klan racism of old, where whites were arguing that they were biologically superior to other races. Now, this new white nationalism was thoroughly rooted in civil rights, meaning that as our country became more and more multicultural, what we're finding is that if you were a non-white ethnicity, you were allowed to be ethnocentric. You could express pride in your race and in your ethnicity and your ethnocultural traditions all you want, but if you were white, you weren't allowed to do that. So in effect, this is Carol Swain, who is herself Black, Carol Swain making the argument that that was an unsustainable paradigm, that you're trying to sell the notion that if you're Black, you're allowed to vote your racial interests. If you're Latino, you're allowed to vote your racial interests. We can celebrate it. We'll report on it. We'll champion it. If you're Asian, you're allowed to vote your racial interests. But if you're white, you're not. You're not allowed to. You cannot have a candidate that comes out and says, "I'm here for white people, and I'm going to represent white interests." You're not allowed to do. You have to be a sovereign individual. You're not allowed to champion your ethnicity. And what Carol Swain argued is we've got two choices with that. Either inevitably white ethno-nationalism is going to assert itself just in the name of fairness, or we're going to stop this nonsense of multiculturalism and ethno-nationalism, and we are going to embrace civic nationalism, where somebody is going to, this is fascinating, somebody is going to have to come along and say that being an American is a race. Being an American is a culture. Being an American is being a people that is united. We can all have our own ethnicities, religions, and so forth, but we are all ultimately united in the cultures, customs, and traditions that define what it means to be an American. And we're going to be unapologetic on that. And she was one of the first persons to endorse Donald Trump in 2016 because she said, that's it. That's the civic nationalism we've been looking for. So we're going to go into that world, I believe, for our nation, if Trump is successful, into a world of civic nationalism. Otherwise, we balkanize. There's no way. Liberalism can't hold us together anymore. That's a dead ideology. So what are we seeing increasingly from the Democratic Party? Just absolute raw tribalism, raw ethno-nationalism. And what are we seeing on the right and the MAGA movement? Strong, powerful, renewed civic nationalism that brings us all together through the shared cultures, customs, traditions of what it means to be an American. So there you go. That's where I think the world is going. Vladimir Putin, to his credit, was able to do that in Russia. Russia has over 100 ethnicities. It was very divided after the fall of the Soviet Union. It actually was, Russia ended up losing 2/3 or a third of its territory overnight with the secessions of, of Ukraine and Belarus and Armenia and Georgia and so forth. They all declared their independence. And all of a sudden, just overnight, they lost a third of their territory that they had for over a century, and then internally, it looked like Russia was going to start splitting apart, and Putin was able to come in and renew a sense of Russian identity for all these 100 different ethnicities and multiple different religions. But not through liberalism, but by re-embracing distinctively Russian culture, customs, tradition that holds everyone together at the civic level. And that's exactly what Trump is attempting to do for our country today. And it looks like he's going to be very successful at it. So there you go, gang. So just call, make that call. Why don't you give that flash? There you go. Flash that number, 717-844-5984. Just leave your question on our hotline. Try to keep it under 30 seconds. We'll feature it on our Tuesday and Thursday shows. Love you guys. I will see you tomorrow for our live stream.